Hi, my name is Madison Gotro, and this is my art appreciation final presentation on Claude Monet. Why I chose Monet is because I first learned about him in my 8th grade year-long art class. We learned a lot about him and the Impressionist style in general and how he was a main founder in the Impressionist style, and so I immediately kind of drew towards how I liked how the Impressionists portrayed nature, and how unique and interesting it was. And so it kind of drew me towards how it all started, which he was a major founder in the Impressionist style. So I thought that it would be interesting to study him more than I already knew, because even though I knew a little bit about him, I didn't know everything. So I learned a lot about him through this project. A little bit about his life. He was born on November 14th, 1840 in Paris, France. His mother died when he was 15, causing him to move in with his widowed aunt. His first success in art began when he was 15. He sold caricatures that he drew. Caricatures are pictures that exaggerate specific characteristics in a person to make comic effect on the person's appearance. He sold each of these for about 20 francs. Along with the caricatures, he enjoyed sketching out pictures of ships. His aunt that he ended up moving in with after his mom died was an amateur painter, and it is believed that she was a great influence on Monet's desire to study drawing with a local artist whose name was Eugene Boden. Boden showed Monet the techniques of painting, which is where he fell in love with painting. He did not know that this would be his future career and produce his greatest successes over the next course of 60 years. He also received art instruction from Jacques Louis David, who was a famous neoclassical artist. His early works were inspired by realists, but Monet veered away from the realist style after being inspired by Edward Manet, who painted with loose handling, bold color, and strikingly unconditional compositions. He no longer emphasized the figures, instead he focused on the qualities of light and atmosphere in each scene. He attended the studio of Swiss artist Charles Gleyre, who taught other future impressionists like Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Frederic Bazille, and Alfred Sisley in 1862. In 1866, he painted The Woman in the Green Dress, using his future wife as a model. Shortly after, in 1867, she gave birth to their first child, Jean. He married Camille Donseux in 1870, just before the Franco-Prussian War broke out. After the outbreak of the war in 1870, Monet took refuge in England in September 1870. While there, he studied the works of John Constable and John Mallard. William Turner, both of those landscapes would serve to inspire Monet's innovation in the study of color. Camille became ill in 1876, and she gave birth to her second son in 1878, which made her health worse. She died at age 32 in 1879 of tuberculosis. Monet ended up painting her on her deathbed. He grieved his wife for a while after she passed, but refused to go into poverty again, and began creating some of his paintings that became most famous. He moved in with Ernest Hochschild in 1878, but Ernest went bankrupt and left for Belgium in 1879, leaving Monet and his wife and kids in the house. Alice, Eugene's wife, helped care for Monet's kids as well as her 6 kids, and when her husband Eugene died, Alice married Monet in 1892. He bought a house in Giverny, France, with his new wife and family, where he painted a lot of series paintings and landscapes. He traveled to the Mediterranean between 1883 and 1908, where he continued to paint many landmarks and landscapes. Alice passed away in 1911, and so did his oldest son, Jean, who had married Alice's daughter, Blanche, who took care of Monet after his wife died. In his later life, cataracts began to set in Monet's eyes, and it caused him to have a reddish tone to his paintings, which was common in cataract victims, so it did affect his paintings. In 1926, he died of lung cancer at the age of 86 in Giverny, France, and he is buried in the Giverny Church Cemetery. A little bit about Monet's style and the period of art he was painting in. He was a French Impressionist painter who was a major leader of the Impressionist movement. He was an Impressionist artist, which was his style. It was more, it influenced more of the modern type of art, the Impressionist style, and the period that he was painting in was the 19th century. Impressionism basically was used to express one's perception before nature, and it was a big influence on modern art, as I said before. Um, his medium and his technique. His medium is oil on canvas, but he would occasionally use pastels and also enjoyed sketching in a sketchbook. His technique was broken color, which broken color was to try to achieve the actual sensation of light itself in a painting. He also used small stroke, broad fields of color and focused on surface effects in order to get the Impressionist idea in his paintings. Some of his influences consisted of Pierre-Auguste Renoir, which was a fellow Impressionist that was also taught by the Swiss artist Charles Gleyre. Edward Monet painted with loose handling, bold color, and strikingly unconditional compositions. He no longer emphasized the figures. He instead focused on qualities of light and atmosphere in each scene. Eugene Boden showed Monet the techniques of painting, which is where he fell in love with painting. And then Charles Gleyre was his teacher in Paris, who taught other Impressionist artists, as I said before. His success, influence, and relevance in art history and today. When he began his art, he was unsuccessful, so much that after the birth of his first child, he attempted to commit suicide by throwing himself into the Seine because of financial reasons. After he lost his wife, he did not want to go back into poverty, so he began to work hard and created many of his most famous and successful works, naming him the father of Impressionism. Impressionism and Monet are now considered the basis of all modern and contemporary art. He is perhaps the most famous Impressionist painter. He was a major leader in the French Impressionist movement. His work helped define the movement and gave it the name Impressionism. Him and his Impressionist friends put on their own exhibitions because that was the only way to show their work, because critics did not like it. And Claude Monet actually was the outspoken advocate for their style, and he took a lot of criticism for it. So that's another main reason why he is considered the father of it and kind of the founder, because he was such a big advocate for this style, and it was really what he enjoyed doing and what he was really good at. So he ended up being really successful in the end. After he had some kind of downfalls in the beginning of his life, he wasn't as successful. But once he advertised and got together and learned a lot more, he became more successful. His most famous work is called Water Lilies. Many people call it the Sistine Chapel of Impressionism because it's so famous. It's actually a series of work that consists of 250 oil paintings, all painted in the last 30 years of Monet's life. The other very famous work of Monet's is called Impressionism Sunrise, and that was painted in 1872. This work was known to give the name to the Impressionism movement. It was not liked by critics, and the movement was actually given the name Impressionism by a satirical review made by a critic. And after this painting, the movement kind of blew up, and the popularity of the Impressionism movement spread to music and literature. He painted some of his most famous works from 1871 to 1878 when he moved to Argenteuil, a village near Paris. Some fun facts about Claude Monet is his first name was actually Oscar Claude Monet, and so he got that when he got baptized. But His parents called him Oscar, and he got famous as Claude Monet, so that's how he went for most of the rest of his life. Um, his father was actually a grocer, and he hoped that his son would follow in his footsteps and also become a grocer, so that was kind of his father's dream. When he moved in with his aunt, he joined the military shortly after in 1961. He signed a 7-year contract, but the second year he got typhoid fever, so his aunt begged them to let him be released. They agreed, as long as he agreed to take an art course at an art school, and he did. And then he was baptized Catholic, but went on to become an atheist. So that's another interesting fact. So that was a little bit about Claude Monet. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation and learned a lot. Thank you for your time, and the end.